Everyone, welcome to our webinar this morning. Thank you very much for joining us. It's an exciting one today. It's a new feature preview. We've been working for months and months now, working on a new feature, the MPS universe, that will be going live imminently in all your analytics accounts. And we feel that we are close enough now to the finish line to actually start making some noise about it and show our lovely clients what to expect when we do go live. Currently kind of penciled in for the next few weeks. Hopefully this goes live. We've still got a bit of data validation and data aggregation and a few bits of development to still do on this. So not definite, but yes, hopefully in the next few weeks. So I'm David Scholes, I'm Director of Wealth Sales. So I'll be walking you through it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, so depending on which way you look at it, my camera's not working. I've got a shiny brand new laptop and within 2 weeks, the camera's already not working. So unfortunately, yes, you won't be able to see me, but hopefully you can hear me, which is the most important part of a presentation. We are using GoToWebinar. Those of you that haven't used GoToWebinar, there's a little questions box somewhere on your screen. We love questions, so feel free to ask as many as you like throughout this presentation. I've got a colleague beside me that will be answering them on the fly as they come through, and I'll always leave time at the very end as well, so we'll jump on and make sure no questions are left unanswered. So in terms of an agenda, we'll obviously be introducing you to the MPS universe, what it is, why we've built it, what it does. Then we'll be talking about the features that are kind of spun up off the back of it. So what can you use that MPS to do? Well, you can filter all of the MPS solutions without restriction. So we're going to cover that off in no particular order. We'll also have a look at the fact sheets as well. So every single MPS has an analytics fact sheet that you can access, again, without restriction. And you'll also be able to access any of the reports and fact sheets the providers are making available as well. In my biased opinion, the most exciting part is the release of our MPS sectors and ratings. In 2025, there is still no market standard for market sectors and ratings. That's something we hope to remedy in the next few weeks when we launch ours. So I'll go through that in a bit of detail as well. And finally, I'll take a bit of a step back and kind of broadly look at all of our applications, because if you're an advisory firm that uses MPS solutions, which I assume you do because you're interested in having a look at the MPS universe, you've centered your entire operations around MPS, and we're starting to do that now with our ecosystem as well. So where does this MPS data surface? Well, if you want to do charge comparisons on advisor asset, it surfaces over there. We're making sure it also surfaces in cash calc, so you can do all your cash flow on the MPS data. And we obviously narrowly focus on MPS universe here today, but where else can that MPS data, or where else does it live on analytics? So we've got all these different applications, all these different jigsaw puzzles. So I'll talk about our Nexus ecosystem and how we're bringing that all together and allowing you to kind of utilize that MPS data as effectively as possible. And then finally, of course, any questions at the very end. Cool. Okay, let's get rid of PowerPoint. Yep, not a big fan of PowerPoint. I like analytics. Right, here we go. So straight away into the system, you'll see in the top left-hand corner under the Instruments tab, you've got the MPS universe ready and waiting for us. Those of you that haven't seen analytics before, are not too familiar with it, when you create things in analytics, it's always off the back of a different universe. Basically, what investment type do you want to look at? Do you want to look at an investment trust? Do you want to look at direct equities? Do you want to look at investment bonds? Do you look at pensions? Do you look at investments? Or in this case, do you want to look at MPS solutions? And again, I'll keep saying this, but without restriction. Those of you that are familiar with our MPS directory, I will explain kind of the relationship between the directory and the universe throughout this presentation. But without restriction, you'll have access to all of the MPS providers on that long list. And if I click on our friends at the very top there, 8 AM, any MPS provider you select, underneath that will load up all of their MPS solutions. So if I pick on Classic 5 and click on Add, drop that into my active list, you'll see straight away access to the fact sheet. So if I click on the fact sheet, it will give me a load of information, headline numbers, and data on this particular proposition. Again, without restriction, I haven't had to enable myself for the 8 AM proposition on the directory. I've now got access to this fact sheet, so I can get a really good insight into what this DFM 8 AM offers me as part of their Classic 5 model portfolio solution. So you can see straight away the crown ratings pop up. More on that in a minute, but doing pretty well, 5 crowns. This is the new sector pop up. So the sector this model portfolio is part of is our new MPS 4565 growth. So again, a bit more information on that in a few moments. This is a benchmark, ATM benchmark themselves against. You've got the AUM, basically the model portfolio size. You've got the launch date pop up. You would have yield pop up if it was an income producing fund. You've got the OCF as well. of the solution and also the DFM charge as well, as alongside the objective of the model portfolio and the biography of the manager and how long they've been managing that solution for. So a huge amount of information already just on one page. Equally, the performance tab will then show you the performance of that MPS versus that sector. So again, ATM Classic 5 versus the MPS 4565, again, doing pretty well. The quartile information on a cumulative and discrete basis, the absolute rank as well, where does it rank within all of the other MPS within that sector, and also importantly, how risky is it against that sector as well, the FE risk score. And then at the very top here, it doesn't produce dividends, so I'll ignore that tab. And then finally, a breakdown. So, what does it invest in? The asset split, the sector split, the regional split. And in this case, it invests in bonds as well. So the credit rating of those bonds and the kind of the growth and defensive split at the very bottom. And finally, if I click on the summary fact sheet at the very top, it will aggregate all of that information into a nice neat one page. Again, when I'm doing this on investment trusts and ETFs and unit trusts and multi-asset funds, I get the same looking fact sheet for those. It should be no different for MPS. If I want to propose my client invest in the 8am model portfolio solution, this is the fact sheet that's going to look exactly the same if I was offering a life strategy solution to them as a kind of a unitized multi-asset fund with my logo at the top and all of the core information I'd want that client to read before we submitted the business. So I'll pick on someone else. I'll get rid of ATM for a second and go to our friends at Invesco. A lot of the providers now are sending us their documents. So let's go and pick on maybe Invesco Managed Balanced. So with when it comes to funds, if I'm an advisor going onto an application like analytics, it's kind of expected that if I'm looking at a multi-asset fund or a single manager fund, I will have all of those regulatory documents as well. A fund has to produce a fact sheet, a KID document, a prospectus, a semi-annual report, etc. But ultimately, the DFMs aren't really under that same regulatory model, so they don't have to produce all of those documents. But that said, they do still create a lot of documents, as I'm sure all of you are aware. So we've created the necessary plumbing and infrastructure and analytics to surface all of those documents as well. So if the provider's sending it to us, if I click on the little fact sheet icon, again, this is some of the data types we'll be getting collect now. Invesco send us not just their own fact sheets, but their quarterly manager commentary as well. So any one of those I click on, I can click on OK, and then automatically get access to their most recent fact sheet, not just the analytics one, but I can get their fact sheet as well. And equally, I can get quarterly manager commentary as well. So their Q2 analysis. Now, essentially, we can support 4 different document types. We can support model portfolio fact sheets. We can support quarterly manager or market commentary. We can do monthly market or manager commentary, and we can also do rebalance reports as well. So if the providers ever rebalance their solutions and create documents off the back of that, then we can support the surfacing of those documents too. And I expect this to be something that is welcomed by the industry as a whole. I know there's a huge issue with a lot of DFMs having to share all these documents with all their clients and trying to manage and orchestrate that. But equally, as from the advisor side, if I'm generally working with 2 or 3 DFMs and each one of those DFMs have got a lot of model portfolios, that's a lot of reports I'm having to orchestrate on my end as well, and find a home for all these reports and store them somewhere. And do I have the most recent Tatton report? What about the most recent Vestra one, etc.? I don't have to worry about that anymore because we've kind of created a conduit here, so all of the DFMs can provide us with those documents and they can be surfaced in one system, the system that you happen to be using on a daily basis. Accessing all of the other fund documents, you should now be able to access all of the MPS documents as well. So that's on every single model portfolio. You'll notice back on this main screen, there's also a little alert icon on the right-hand side as well. Now, you can do this with funds. You've always been able to do this with funds and multi-asset funds, but again, it should be no different for a model portfolio. So maybe I'm using this Classic 5 ATM portfolio. The performance is really good at the moment. So what I want to make sure is I want to start setting some alerts up to say, right, well, if that model ever goes up or down by 10%, let me know about it. Some of the data I just referenced a second ago, okay, the DFM fee is currently 15 basis points. So if that ever changes, let me know. Fund size, if it ever doubles in fund size or goes up by a particular percent, again, let me know, alert me. And also the OCF, if they rebalance or when they rebalance or when the underlying funds change their charges, again, I want to know when that changes from 0.3. Also ratings, coming back to the Crown ratings, when that changes, if it changes, we rebalance every 6 months. So as and when that changes, if it changes, let me know when it does. And equally, if the FE risk score changes, again, let me know too. And if they're providing us with those documents, like the fund provider fact sheet, I can add that across and say every single time they upload a brand new document, just ping me a little alert to let me know. And it's just simply done via email. My email is down there, the registered user of that account, and those alerts will be pinged to me as and when any of one of those are triggered. So a really useful little addition. Let's get on to sectors and ratings. I'll come back to these in a few moments. I'll just close these down. Under the sector tab, when you click on the sector tab, you'll notice again, sectors are always controlled by the universe you select. So I've got the new UK MPS universe selected, and as if by magic, I've got all of the sectors appear, all of the new MPS sectors. Why have we created MPS sectors? Well, when we launched the directory about 10 years ago, one of the things that a lot of people requested back then was for us to create MPS sectors. In fact, I remember a very good conversation with our friends Hawksmoor, where within a matter of months releasing the directory, they're asking us when we're going to create sectors. So good news, it's taken us a while, but we finally launched them. And it's taken us a while, of course, because you need that critical mass of model portfolio solutions. We couldn't have released sectors 10 years ago because there are only 5 providers on the directory and only about 75 models. Well, now we've got 85 providers on the directory and 1,500 model portfolio solutions. So easy enough now for us to cluster into different sector types. I spun up this chart last week for a LinkedIn post, and I thought I'd reference it here because it kind of gives a good visual of why it's so important to have MPS sectors. If you look at the 1,500 model portfolio solutions in our database and look at what benchmarks they're using to benchmark themselves against, that's not to say what other people benchmark them against, it's what they're benchmarking themselves against. You'll see that roughly 50 to 60% of all MPS solutions benchmark themselves against basically multi-asset sectors, mixed investment sectors. These are baskets of multi-asset funds. Another 20, 30% benchmark themselves against the ARC indices, which are basically a basket of kind of full-blooded and on lots of different kind of discretionary mandates. So again, not model portfolios or not explicitly model portfolios. And then the tail is stuff like global sector and money market sector and FTSE all share. Again, not a basket of model portfolio solutions. And this isn't an attack on the DFMs, of course. This is just to point out that there is no basket of model portfolio solutions they can benchmark themselves against. That's why they're having to use these alternatives, these not so good fit. But ultimately, if I'm an advisor or a DFM and I want to compare my balanced model portfolio against its peers, i.e. other balanced model portfolio solutions, I don't want to compare it against a basket of balanced multi-asset funds or a basket of full-blooded discretionary mandates or a basket of global funds. I want to benchmark it against a basket of managed MPS balanced solutions. So that's why we've created these sectors, and we again expect these to be very well received both from the advisor side and the DFM side. And if I select, actually I'll select all of them initially, just go and grab all of them, fire them into the active list at the very bottom. I'll take away the ones that are unclassified. And on the right-hand side, I can start doing stuff with this data. So just as a start for 10, I could throw that into a nice little 5-year performance graph and show the performance of those sectors side by side. So you can kind of see the difference in returns based on the level of equity content within each sector. And then you can also maybe throw that into a nice little scatter chart, again, over 5 years, just to show the performance versus risk. As you go up the risk scale, as you go up the equity content scale, you should get better returns off the back of it. And I can start adding in my portfolios or my funds into here. I can add whatever I like into that chart. Now, if I pick on one of them, maybe the MPS 65, 85% growth, naming convention, what do we mean by growth? So I've mentioned equity content. We actually look at equity and property. So we're looking at the growth parts of the portfolio. So any model portfolio within this sector will have an exposure of between 65 and 85% into equities or property. Now, admittedly, most model portfolio solutions don't really tend to invest that much in property. It's a slither at most, so it doesn't really have much effect on these figures. But we did want to include property because property is a growth asset. We don't want to be lumping that in with cash and bonds. So that's how we're essentially segregating those solutions into sectors. Now, what does that mean? Well, on each sector, you'll get a fact sheet like this, and the fact sheet will give you an insight into how many model portfolios within the sector, in this case 326. That's provided by 71 model portfolio providers. Actually, coincidentally, the average risk is 71 for that sector as well. You've got the best performers, the worst performers, the most volatile, the least volatile, over lots of different time periods. You can flip between them. At the very top here, you've got a nice little performance tab as well, giving you a lot of insight into how the performance of the sector has done over the last 5 years, cumulative, discrete, and the risk of that sector on a month-by-month basis over the last 5 years. And also, we're obviously collecting fund size data as well, so it will tell you the biggest model portfolios based on fund size at the very bottom here. Then the members, most important one, you've got 326 funds within this sector. There they all are in an alphabetical list. The risk scores, the performance, the volatility, but more importantly, the Crown ratings. So a lot of you will be aware of the Crown ratings. It's a heritage rating system we've used for decades successfully on basically everything on our database has a Crown rating. So again, an MPS should be no different. MPS should have sectors, MPS should have a universe, MPS should just simply use the same methodology we're using for everything else when it comes to Crown rating. So you'll find lots of documents on our system to define the methodology we're using for a Crown rating, but as a quick overview, Crown rating looks at performance, it looks at consistency, it looks at volatility and alpha over the last 3 years. And obviously we can't create a Crown rating unless the funds are clustered into appropriate sectors. So as if by magic, now we've clustered them into appropriate sector types, automatically the Crown ratings populate, which is wonderful. So in one fell swoop, again, when we release this to the masses, when we enable you with the MPS universe, you have access to all of these MPS sectors and all of these MPS ratings and all of that appropriate data to start making some informed decisions about which MPS solutions you might want to use moving forward. And now this all leads me quite neatly into the sectors. So if I just get rid of my, sorry, not sectors, filters, if I just get rid of my sectors for a second. I've got sectors, I've got ratings, I've got all this new data types coming in. I've got all of the model portfolios available now on the system. Again, I should be able to filter these. Again, if I'm in the market for a new MPS solution, maybe I don't use MPS at the moment, so I want a quick scan across all the different solutions to find the most appropriate for me. Or maybe I'm currently using a solution that has fallen out of favor with me and I want to go and find a new DFM partner, then you can use our filtering tool for that as well. So I can click on filter, click on new. Those of you that have used our filtering tool for funds, again, it really works no differently to MPS. You got universe, as long as you selected UK MPS at the top, you got 1,500 providers, sorry, 1,500 solutions ready and waiting for you to filter on. And just basically going back to some of the filter types I've already discussed here, I can pick out specific sectors perhaps. Let's just, again, pinpoint that 65 to 85 sector, 326. Let's make sure I'm only looking at the solutions that have got 5 crowns and above. Click on add, that goes down to 27. Want a bit of consistency, so let's make sure they've got first quartile over 1 year, 3 year and 5 year. Add all of that in. And equally, a couple of other ones you might want to focus on, you know, can filter on fund size, can filter on OCF, can filter on yield. And at the very bottom down here, even investment characteristics like asset type. You know, at the moment, a lot of MPS providers invest in North American equities. Maybe I want to look for the ones bucking the trend a bit. What are the ones that don't invest heavily in North American equities? So I can start searching for, you know, where they invest. And equally, I want to look for investment focus. So maybe I'm looking for ethical solutions, ethical models, or maybe I'm looking for ethical passive solutions or one of the other. So we've got passive tracking in there as well. This won't come on day one, but one of the other things we're looking at collecting at the moment as I speak is platform availability as well. So hopefully within time, certainly by the end of the year, our hope and our ambition would be for you to also filter on platform availability as well. But please bear with us because that's obviously a lot of data to start collecting. But once I'm done, come up to the top, there are 11 providers that have hit all my criteria. I can click on show results. Now I can PDF this page. So click on the little PDF button, that can go straight onto my file. So all of the research I'm doing here and determining what solutions I'm going to be using moving forward, anyone that I want a PDF, I can do and have that on file, so I can waive that in front of compliance and the FCA regulators when they come knocking and asking me why I've picked particular solutions. And you can see here, if I select any of these green arrows, I can ping them right the way back to the main screen. So if I come back to the main screen, they'll be added over here for me to start looking at the alerts and fact sheets, etc. And one thing you will notice with on everything on the left-hand side is they don't have any tick boxes. So it means I can't do anything with them on the right-hand side. I can take the sectors and do stuff with it on the right-hand side, but the model portfolios I'm getting from the MPS universe, I can't throw them into a chart. It would just say no instrument selected. I can't throw them into a table, no instrument selected. I can't throw them into a report. I can't put them into the risk profile. I can't throw them into cash calc. I can't throw them into advisor asset. I can't throw them into the reduction yield tool, etc., etc., etc. So the idea is, if you wanted to get that, all of the features to then start managing that proposition, because perhaps I'm using a solution that I now want to use going forward, that's where the directory comes in. So this is the relationship between the MPS universe and the directory. The MPS universe gives you all of this data to make informed decisions about which investment solution, model portfolio solution you want to use, and then you can use the directory to enable yourself for that proposition. And let me give you an example. So let's say I've decided to use LGT Vestra, their blended defensive solution. This is a neat example for me to show you that it also works with city codes. I think I've got this right. There we go. If I type in BU2T, that's the city code for LGT. Now, again, model portfolios don't have ISIN codes, they don't have CEDAW codes, they don't have MEX IDs, they don't have EPIC numbers, they don't have any identifiers. Well, again, in one fell swoop, they do now. They can have a universal identifier. We use our own city codes for that. So everything on our database has a city code. Model portfolio should be no different. And if you use the bulk code importer, if you knew the city codes, you can import all of those models via the bulk code importer as well. But if I add that to my list, I don't just want to add that, I want to add its sector. So add that across. And on the right-hand side, again, if I try and create a performance graph over 5 years, it will load up because the sector will pull through, but the Vestra, the LGT solution doesn't. So if I come back to my main screen, that's easily remedied. I can just click on that button there. It loads up the MPS directory with all of the different providers, the 85 providers. I can just scroll down to LGT, left click on their icon, gives me a load of marketing writing about who they are, what they do, what they offer. And at the very bottom there, there'll be a big old blue button saying activate me. I don't have it because I'm already activated. I can click on activate me. I'll be activated for the model portfolios with LGT. And coming back to the main screen under the portfolio tab now, I can open that up and there's the LGT blended defensive as a portfolio. I can add that in. I no longer need the MPS from the universe, so I'll get rid of that. And now I can compare that against the sector using any of the kind of the full-blooded features on the right-hand side, the charting, the tables, the reports, and now I can start comparing that against its sector and see how good it is. But obviously, for those of you that have used analytics in the past, the main use of the right-hand side is mainly around comparing that against what the client currently have. So now that I've got the portfolio putting through via the directory, I can compare that against where the client is at the moment. So under the portfolio tab, I can go and grab my client Keith Baker, who's got a number of pension solutions that I've built into the system, and now I can compare it against that. So I can use regular savings charts, regular withdrawals, line charts, scatter charts, reporting, and I can very quickly show the client, well, based on your risk profile, which we may have done on analytics, it's suggesting you are a defensive client, and we think the best suitable solution for that is the LGT blended defensive solution. And now I want to compare that against where you currently are in a number of different ways. Performance is obviously just one of them, to show you the core differences between where we're proposing you go to and where you are at the moment. Again, this is where the directory comes in because it gives you all of that data to start creating content over on the right-hand side. And just another final one, another nice one to look at is something like a portfolio comparison report, where again, I can take those two portfolios. Now I've got it enabled via the directory. I can start creating better comparisons to be able to show my client, well, look, Mr. and Mrs. Client, again, this is what you've got at the moment. We're going to look at performance, but we're going to look at other things as well. We're going to look at the charges. We're going to look at the underlying holdings, the ratings of those. We're going to look at the performance we've just looked at, net of charges. Remember, the performance will be net of the DFM fees, the OCFs, and the advisor fee and platform fee if you want as well. Then there's the volatility differences between them. Look, what we're proposing is slightly less volatile than what you currently have, and it's suitable for your risk profile. And then because it's suitable for your risk profile, we're taking the appropriate level of asset allocation compared to what you currently have at the moment. So there's that all goes hand in hand to propose why we're suggesting you should move away from that solution and move into the blended defensive solution. So I won't go into too much detail on that because I'll be here all day talking about the features and analytics, but that's again the relationship between the MPS universe and the MPS directory. The universe brings all that data to you at your fingertips under the instruments tab. When you want to actually start using the features on the right-hand side and the risk profiler and the reduction in yield tool, and linking that to the likes of CashCalc, you've got to enable yourself via the directory, which is either that little icon I selected a second ago, or if you just click on MPS directory, you can get it from there as well. Now, how does this fit into our Nexus ecosystem? I've just mentioned there the ability to grab all of this MPS data and start comparing it against whatever you like and run really high-end analysis and assessment on all of these MPS solutions. How do I push that now into CashCalc? I've just literally created a back-tested performance of Keith versus my proposed portfolio. I'd like to take the same data and do that on my cash flow model. So if I open up my LGT blended defensive solution or Keith Baker, I can do this on any portfolio. Again, once I'm enabled via the directory, I can click on that little, move to the left-hand side, I can click on that little export to CashCalc button. And I can click on that and now export the growth rate and the asset allocation template and click on create template. And that creates it on the cash calc side. Now, what does that mean? Well, if I come into cash calc, now this has been left in the background without being used. I might have to refresh this in a second. Let's see how far I get. But if I now jump into cash calc, you'll see that I've got a solution here, a proposed solution I'm offering my client. I'm suggesting the Scottish Widows platform, and I'm going to suggest that blended defensive strategy with LGT. And at the moment, I'm suggesting it grows at 4.5%. And if I go down to my cash flow model, that's exactly what it looks like. That big dark blue bar is my LGT solution, defensive balanced, blended defensive, and currently runs out at the age of about 89. Now, if I come back to my savings pot, why have I used 4.5% growth rate? Why am I assuming the blended defensive? Why is the blended defensive solution growing at 4.5%? Well, to be honest, most of the time it's just gut instinct. Most of the time, people come onto the likes of cash calc and cash flow tools. They're picking a growth rate based on gut instinct. They think that, okay, well, balanced solution, 5.5%, aggressive, I don't know, 7 sounds about right. Clearly, that's not going to wash with, again, Mr. or Mrs. Compliance or FCA when they come knocking and ask you, why did you use 4.5% for your blended defensive solution with LGT? Kind of felt right. So that's why we've built this integration, again, to remedy that problem. Now that I've pulled across the LGT blended defensive solution, I can edit this savings pot. And rather than just pick a growth rate that I think is suitable, I can go to template. I can start typing in, should be able to find it just by typing LGT. And there we go. There's my blended defensive that I've pulled across from analytics. And if I click on update pension, it was on -237. Now it's on -129 because it's performing that bit better. And essentially what it's doing is it's taking across the asset allocation data. It's looking at the asset allocation data on analytics. It's got an aggregated annualized rate for every single asset class. So it's building you a bespoke growth rate, essentially. If I go back in there, actually, it's telling you what it is. The bespoke growth rate for that model is 5.25. Take away inflation is 0.275. And now I can cash flow that with a bit of comfort and understanding that we are actually using a bit of scientific logic to forecast. And now suddenly the solution is doing a lot better than what we was doing before when I was just guesstimating a 4.5% growth rate. And even better than that, of course, I can do that with the current position with Keith Baker. So this current position, I've simply done exactly the same, but tethered to Keith Baker's pension that I've pulled across from analytics. So now when I go to my cash flow model, I can compare the forecast and say, well, look, we've got the crossroads here. We've used analytics to look one way and go back tested, whether it's regular savings, regular withdrawals, lump sum, doesn't matter, scatter charts. I'm able to look at past performance and show you what has happened. And I'm able to use the same data, the same asset allocation data, same consistency, push that into my cash flow model and run a very similar comparison, but looking the other way at my T-junction and look forward and now project that. And I can show Mr. and Mrs. Client that with your current position, with your Keith Baker portfolio, your solution's going to end up on about minus 237,000 versus a proposed solution, which is will end up on the forecast at minus 129,000. This isn't obviously looking at your property, so we've obviously got equity release to consider when we hit the red. So it's a really nice little solution that MPS data can float between the divide, between these different applications of ours, and start powering your cash flow as well as the charts and analytics. Equally, because I pulled across the asset allocation template as well, if I come back to my proposed solution, you can see that my proposed solution with LGT, that will kind of be exhausted by the time the client hits about 92, and then we're relying on these other pots to get us to about 96, 97. So this is just one forecast, but I might want to run a few more than that just to make sure I'm happy with what this is proposing. So I can run a stress test, I can run a Monte Carlo, I can go into my Scottish Widows pension, run the Monte Carlo simulation, and because I've pulled in the asset allocation from analytics, I can pick whatever risk grade the clients come out as, and then I've just got my blended defensive in here, pulling through again the same asset allocation on analytics, and also the forecast was running out when they were 92, so let's run it until then. And now I can run 10,000 simulations over the top of that, and again give myself some comfort. If we run 10,001 simulations overall, there's a 72% chance that the assets will stay above £0 and essentially not run out of money. If I want that to be higher, maybe the target is to make sure it doesn't exhaust lower than 100,000. You can put the threshold at 100,000 up here. It's just I add 0. So there's, as I said, there's lots of ways I can take that data that lives and breathes in analytics, dynamically updating on the fly. I can now take that and move that into the other parts of our Nexus ecosystem to start doing other things that are necessary for this particular client. And let's go to the other side of the ecosystem for charge comparison. You've seen there that I've used analytics to do back-tested performance. We've looked at asset allocations, we've looked at volatility, We've now used cash cow to do the cash flow forecasting, but probably one of the most important things I need to do is charge comparison. I want to run a full-blooded charge comparison, taking into account everything. Charges to the platform we're using, OCF of the funds, the DFM costs, the transactional costs, the incidental costs, and my cost, the advisor fee. And I want to run that against the seeding schemes that my client's moving away from, i.e. this pension. So we started with the ATM solution. We're going to end with them as well. So if we come back into analytics, just get rid of this. I want to go into advisor asset and start running charge comparisons. Advisor asset, for those of you that don't know, is basically a feature within analytics. So anyone that uses analytics has this now. So you can click on platform analysis tools. You can either run a charge comparison if you don't have any seeding schemes, or if you do have seeding schemes, it will be a consolidation comparison instead. So I'm just going to use that one. And before I run a charge or consolidation piece, I need to make sure those DFM portfolios are pulling through into my account. And I do that just by making sure I go to my portfolio tab. These are all of the portfolios currently on my account. I can click on add new. I can select pre-configured DFM and click on continue. And this is basically, for want of a better word, this is an MPS directory built into this side of our ecosystem. Now, we've had quite a few MPS providers suddenly launch of late. We welcome to iBoss, King & Jackson and Saracen and Partners to join the existing ATM, EBI, Tatton and Quilter. And if you don't, and if the investments, if you don't see your MPS provider on there, go and nudge them, pester them. It's very easy to get them added onto this, but it will make your job a lot easier to then run the charge comparisons, because I'll show you that now. So again, I want to use the ATM portfolios. I generally tend to use 5, 6, and 7 for whatever reason. So I've just simply ticked on those ones and clicked on continue to make sure they're pulling through. And it means that back on my portfolio tab, they're automatically built for me. And it makes it look so simple, but it's so complicated in the background, because again, an MPS is going to be on lots of different platforms. So we need to know that. We also need to know the difference in charge. I don't think this is true actually for ATM. I think it's the same charge on every platform. That's a bit of a USP of theirs, but a lot of model portfolio solutions have a different charge for the different platforms. Of course, it makes it a bit more complicated. If I invest on Transact, maybe my balance model is going to have an OCF of 0.31, but on Scottish Widows platform, it's slightly different because of share class availability. That charge is actually 0.33. So it's only 2 basis points, but I need to know that when I'm running a charge comparison. I need to be pulling through the exact charge of the model on the exact platform I'm using. And that's exactly what it's doing in the background, aggregating all of that data for us. So let's run a charge comparison or a consolidation for a client. We're going to be using Keith Baker again. We've used him in analytics to do all the past performance. We've used him in CashCalc to do all the forecasted cash flows. And now I can use him in this part of the ecosystem to run charge comparisons. So this is Keith. He's got 3 seeding schemes. You can build as many seeding schemes as you like, cross wrapper. So to add in an extra layer of complexity, I'm not just consolidating 2 pensions. I've actually got an ISA as well that we want to move across and put that into an ATM portfolio as well. So those are the 3 seeding schemes. I've added in all the necessary growth rates and the projection rates I would have got from the provider, or the charges if I know them. Where do I want that money to go? I've already pre-populated this to save myself a few seconds, but I want the ISA to go into ATM AQ Classic 6. I want the 2 pensions to be aggregated into Classic 5. It's automatically worked out how much money, how many pounds to put into each one, because it knows the value of my existing pots. It will then work out the most suitable growth rates based on the projection rates of my seeding schemes. And I can now add in my advisor fees because I've baked those in already under the My Charges tab. So I only need to build those once and can just add them in here. And if I click on next, it's now going to look at every single platform. And again, it's doing that really complicated bit in the background. It knows what platform each one of these models are available on. So it's going to look across all of those models and ignore all the rest that it's not available on. It knows their tiered charging, it knows your charges, it knows the OCF of the model, it knows the transactional charge, the incidental charges, etc., etc. And it aggregates all of that and gives you an ROI figure on every single platform. Now, admittedly, as an advisor firm, this year you might have decided to use Aegon, Aberdeen, and Aviva for all of your model portfolio cases, and therefore you don't want a list of 20 different platforms. That's fine. You can set up exclusions in Advisor Asset and say, look, this year in 2025, I want to exclude all of these platforms, and every single time I run any kind of analysis, just show me Aegon, Aberdeen, and Aviva. And therefore, it will be a lot quicker to load up because we're only having to run that on 3 platforms, and you'll just get a selection of 3 platforms, and you can work out on your panel of platforms that you use, this is going to be the cheapest. It's sorted on the cheapest essentially for this particular case we're working on. So I can go and grab the cheapest one. I've been a bit lazy. And then it will run the secondary set of calculations and compare that against the seeding scheme. Look, we know what the cheapest platform solution is for you now based on all of those tiered charges. Let's compare that against where you are at the moment with those seeding schemes to see how much that differs by. We can say, look, if you stayed in those seeding schemes, Mr. and Mrs. Client, non-advised seeding schemes, you're currently paying about 1.39. We want to move you across to this new platform. We get to benefit from that tiered charge. We get to aggregate a load of your assets on one platform and therefore make the most of a much cheaper cost. Even with my fee included, because we're using some cheaper solutions as well, we can actually make it cheaper for you by 5 basis points. And then the kind of line by line, solution by solution, how much they cost, and then I can spin that up into a report that kind of illustrates and details the difference in charges between the two. And again, the reasons why I'm proposing this solution based on the charge. I'm proposing this solution based on the stuff that we got from CashCalc, the stochastic modeling, the Monte Carlo projections, etc. Also based on the past performance, the asset allocation, the volatility, the crown ratings, the sectors, everything in analytics, and now the charge comparison on the left. Now, admittedly, you may not use every single one of these for every case, but it's about choice. You've got this wide variety of different features and solutions now for you to use on every single MPS solution within our database. So I hope you found that useful. As I said at the very start, and I probably should have reiterated during that presentation, we love questions. So again, if you've got any questions, there's still time. I'm going to dip into that in a second. So again, my colleagues will be answering quite a few of these as we've gone through, but any questions you've got so far, feel free to pop them into the question box on GoToWebinar. Just to signpost a couple of things, the team will be in touch. So the team will be in touch over the coming days just to offer you a free trial. If you don't use any of these features we've spoken about there, they'll offer you a free trial opportunity. So if you accept that, we'll just set you up with a month's trial and get one of the team to kind of walk you through it, because I appreciate your processes are all going to be slightly different to one another. So we can run you through like a one-to-one demonstration, actually show you how to use these solutions with your specific process in mind, whatever network you're part of in particular. We also run a lot of these webinars. So if you found this useful, as the name suggests, we run one every Wednesday. We do actually run a lot of other webinars as well. So there's a little QR code in the middle there. Feel free to scan that and sign yourself up. If you scan that QR code and go onto the page, it will actually show you the webinars forthcoming over the coming weeks. You can actually get a bit of an insight into what we're going to be talking about. So feel free to sign up to those. And me and the team, we post a lot on LinkedIn. We post a lot of hopefully what we think is quite valuable insights and updates and kind of tips and hints and tricks on these systems. So again, if you're active on LinkedIn and want to link in with us, again, feel free to scan that QR code. That's admittedly linking in with just me, but anything the team post, I'll be resharing as well. So that'd be good for you to connect in that way as well. Let me just pause this screen just so I can have a look at the questions. Make sure they remain anonymous. Bear with me. I think that's the right button. A couple of questions. I'll just start with forenames, not surnames. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, Ryan's asked, when does it go live? Very, very good question. I don't really have a very good enough answer, unfortunately. I'm led to believe it will be in a matter of weeks. So the penciled live date is in about 3 weeks' time. So that's what we're hoping for. As with any kind of development, it was particularly when we're talking about data, that may change. But yeah, as I said, we've been working on this for a very, very long time. So we know that we're very close to that kind of conclusion or finish line. So we want to start talking about it. So yes, I'm sorry, it's a rubbish answer to your question, but yes, very soon. Thomas, can I download a copy of this webinar? Yes, you can. We will send out the recording afterwards. Have you any real competitors, Chris? Yeah, very good question. Not really, no. I mean, we're a company that essentially mix data with software. So there's a lot of companies out there that do the software part, but none that really do the data part as well. So we're in a really real sweet spot that we are a data house. So that's where we started, right? So decades ago, we started off as a data aggregation house. We go out there and collect investment data. 10 years ago, we started collecting MPS data. So our fund and MPS database is unparalleled. It's unrivaled. We've got a huge database that is constantly being validated and checked. But then on the other side of the fence, we have the software part of the business that builds software that then allows us to illustrate the data we're collecting. And we can very quickly, again, pass that across the divide. All the data we're collecting on one side, we can just plumb that into the software that we're doing. So again, hopefully that's a good enough answer. But yeah, so I would say no competitors that can do both. Some competitors that do the software very well, some competitors that do the data very well, but none that have managed to blend the two. Riz, can you remind me when the, sorry, you've already asked, I've already answered that one. Chris. Yeah, why don't you have a platform filter? Why don't you have a platform availability filter at the end when you can do platform availability later on in the process? So if you would have noticed, Chris, that when I did the platform availability at the very end of Advisor Asset, there were only a few providers on there. So this is what I mean by gradually collecting the data. We don't want to go live with the feature until we have enough data. So we're just in that process at the moment of collecting that platform availability data, and then we'll go live with it. But the platform availability tool I used at the very end there on ATM, there was only what, 7 providers we've collected that data on. There's 85 of them, so we want a critical mass of providers before we start launching that into analytics. And to get into a bit more complexity, that doesn't live on the database. The data we're collecting on Advisor Asset lives and breathes on Advisor Asset, not on the central database that then feeds analytics. So all very technical and very complicated. But yes, that's why it can't easily feed into analytics. It just needs a bit more work. Yeah, thank you, Ashley. So Ashley, yeah, so Ashley asked, do the MPS providers have to provide access to the MPS directory on a case-by-case basis? Yes, they do on a directory. On the directory they do. So they have to enable you. They're enabling you for all of their underlying holdings, which is their IP. So they're the ones that dictate who should and shouldn't get access to the portfolios. But as I said, the MPS via the universe that we've focused on mainly today, no, you don't have to have permission for that. That will simply flood through into your account once we enable the universe. Made several requests. Sorry, this is one from who's this? Duncan. Yeah, so Duncan, you've asked for access from a couple of MPS providers and they haven't given you access. The best thing to do would just be to reach out to that provider. I mean, generally it should take about 24 hours, 24 to 48 hours to get that done. I mean, it's essentially there's a human in the loop that just has to press a button to enable you. If they haven't enabled you, they will either say no, and they will actually explain why they haven't. But if it's still pending, yeah, that's not good. Reach out to the provider directly and say you really need access to their data. Can you enable me? And that will be fast tracked. But yeah, that's not the standard experience most people have. It generally takes about a day or two to get enabled via the directory. So every time I go back to the questions, it goes right all the way back to the top again. So I'm having to scroll down. Yes, that one's been done. Only a couple more here. Yeah, sorry, Abdul, you've asked what does constituent portfolios mean. I don't know when I said that. I obviously did say that at some stage in the demo, but I can't remember what part I used that wording for. So unfortunately, I can't answer that, annoyingly. Yes, I don't know, unfortunately. Unless if you're still listening, feel free to throw a follow-up question if you can be any clearer, but I can't remember when I said that. Answered that one. Thank you, Jacob. Who's asked this? So thank you, Chris. Fact sheets are all based around PDF format. Are there other ways to directly link FE funding for fact sheets directly into back office, not using PDF? It seems a bit old-fashioned. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Chris. Yeah, the world still uses PDF, unfortunately. I mean, I've been a long advocate of moving across to something like HTML and having more HTML fact sheets and that data populating. So no, unfortunately not. There's no way at the moment. The fact sheets obviously live as an HTML web page on analytics, and then you can export as a PDF. But no, at the moment, no, there's no plans and there's no way in which that can be kind of shared with your back office in any other way rather than a PDF. Yeah, I can't think of any better answer to that question. My apologies, but no, I agree with you. That was answered. Sophie, again, you've asked, yeah, when does that go live? We've just answered that one. That one's answered as well. Any new ones? So I think just one final question from Jack. So Jack, you asked, so we can't see any managed portfolio rankings within an MPS sector in a performance table, for example, without having the necessary license activated within the MPS directory. Yes, that's true. Yeah, very much so. So you can't throw all of that data into the tables. We will be making this data available via FinExcel. So you will be able to do that on FinExcel if you use FinExcel. That would be a universe will enable us. Again, probably shortly after we launch the universe on analytics. But yes, you can't just take all that data and throw it into a performance table. If you saw earlier in the recording, you may have joined late. You can go into the sector fact sheet and it gives you the table. So it does show you the table of all of the providers. So you do get the table, but it's not very dynamic. You can't really do much with it. It will show you every single provider within the sector and their performance beside each other in volatility. But you can't then start sorting based on quartiles. Although admittedly you could on the filter. You could go onto the filter and say, I want to look at this sector and look at all of the solutions that have been first quartile. So there are ways around that. But ultimately, your question is, can you take all of that data and throw it into a performance table? No, you can't. Not with the MPS universe. You'd have to be enabled via the directory. Cool. I hope I've answered all those questions, folks. Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think I've got all of those. I'll just end with playing this screen again. Bear with me. Just show those QR codes again. Where are they? From current slides, so I'll just end on this screen, so I'll allow you to scan the QR codes if you've not already. But yes, thank you very much for your time. As I said, more news to follow when we finally got a definitive launch date, but hopefully that's given you some food for thought and a better understanding and insight into what we've been building over the last few months and what you will have access to imminently. And as I said, hopefully you'll be able to now hit the ground running with that data the moment we give the green light and push that data live into everyone's account. So yeah, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn, scan the QR code for more webinars. And yeah, all that's left to say, have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you very much for joining us. Cheers.